Hi, I'm Carly, and thank you for joining me for the first in the series of the myths, the facts, the research. This is where I'm going to be looking at different topics that are important for you during pregnancy and postnatally, and actually figuring out what the evidence says, rather than what random people on the internet say. So, this presentation is going to be about Diastasis Recti Abdominis. I'm going to use the current evidence to answer questions such as what is Diastasis Recti, is it a problem, and what can I do to help? Hope you find it useful. So this is probably the scariest myth out there, and that is I have split my abdominals or I've torn my abdominals. It sounds so scary, and I remember when I was first diagnosed with Diastasis Recti, it was before I'd done any of my studies for becoming a pre and postnatal specialist, and I was so scared and I was so worried because it just sounds horrendous, but you can rest assured that that's not what's happened. I'm going to explain what it is. So yes, please don't worry. We're going to learn a lot about it in this presentation, and by the end I hope you leave feeling so much calmer. So it's actually caused by the stretching and thinning of the linea alba, and it's characterised by an increased distance between the rectus muscles. So what this means is the linea alba is a connective tissue that runs down the centre of your abdomen, and it's what your rectus muscles attach onto. And as your baby grows and your tummy grows, then that connective tissue becomes stretched and it becomes thinner. And I want you to know that that is normal. As your baby is getting bigger inside of you, your body's adapting and it's allowing you to expand. And most women will find that after 8 weeks postpartum, it has gone back to a functional level. You might still see that there's going to be more of a gap there than there was before. It really depends on the person. The evidence isn't clear as to what can, I suppose, predispose some people compared to others. There's a few ideas that we can talk about. And just to let you know, the rectus muscles, they are your six-pack muscles. So they're the muscles that go down your abdomen in the middle. So yes, we'll get more into that. So here we go. It's a lot easier to see on a picture rather than me trying to explain it. So here's the image, and it shows the first picture, A, that is without diastasis. So you'll see those little six-pack muscles, they're quite close together there. Then a B is an open diastasis, where it's the whole length. C is below the umbilicus, and D is above the umbilicus. And when I had my diastasis recti, I still have it to a certain degree now, but not as bad. I really found that mine was quite high and above the belly button, but it really varies, and you can get somebody, you can check it yourself if you know how to, or you can get a professional to check it for you. If you want any more information on that, then you can feel free to contact me. Here's where the internet tries to scare people. What problems could it cause? The key here is could. So there's some anecdotal evidence and there's some other evidence more from the past that says that because it affects the core stability and those compromising the ability for the abdominal muscles to generate force, there's some thoughts that it could create back pain, it could create urinary incontinence, pelvic girdle pain, and cosmetic concerns. I am going to get more into this on the next slide. There is a risk of hernias because the linea alba is stretched and thinner. If there could be some kind of trauma or something that can cause a hernia. In that case, if the hernia is, if it's like intestinal hernia compared to just fatty tissue hernia, then it could need surgical treatment. But really, if you don't have a hernia, we're going to get onto it. So this study was carried out in 2021, and it uses self-reports from 72 women, and it shows that the women with diastasis recti, they may have weaker abdominal muscles and more abdominal pain, but they haven't actually reported a higher incidence or prevalence of pelvic floor disorders, lower back pain, or pelvic girdle pain. And there is more evidence that comes up with this kind of conclusion as well. So similarly, this study followed 300 women during their pregnancy and up to 12 months postpartum. And even though there was quite a high proportion of women with diastasis recti, that's what we expect. As I've said before, it's quite common. They actually found that the women with it and without it reported the same amount of lumbopelvic pain 12 months postpartum. So it is beginning to show that these things that you see on the internet is that it's going to cause this, it's going to cause that, it's going to make your life a misery. We're starting to debunk some of that. And actually the evidence that's coming forward now is that it won't necessarily have such a massive impact on your life as what people might have you believe. So does it need fixing? Well, most of the time the gap is going to reduce on its own and it will all just go back to normal. However, if it doesn't and you find that it's causing you problems or you're worried about how it looks, then I'd say seek advice. Because even though the evidence is saying about back pain and the pelvic pain, pelvic floor issues, that it doesn't contribute, it isn't 100% that it doesn't. So I would say there could be other issues at play, so it's definitely worth getting checked out by a pelvic health physiotherapist. So, does exercise actually help? Or is it best to do nothing? Is it best to stay still? Is it best to go down the surgical route? There's lots of questions about this, and the evidence on this is just a bit mind-blowing, but I'm going to go through a few different articles and come up with the conclusions at the end. So I want to focus on more of the physical and potential therapeutic exercises that you can do. But then again, surgery can be an option, but it isn't always going to be needed. Quite often it's not needed. The really interesting thing that I found was where there were articles about diastasis recti published in journals to do with surgery, they often opted for a surgical approach, whereas if you go to the physiotherapy or more the physiotherapy journals, they are more likely to offer exercise. So there you can already see the kind of bias that's happening within even the scientific community. That's why it gets really difficult to know what it is that you should be doing. So what are the potential exercises that I found through going through the literature? What are the things that people seem to be doing? So strengthening the transverse abdominis muscle or the rectus muscle. We've spoken about the rectus muscle, and the transverse abdominis muscle is the deep core muscle, and it acts like a corset going all the way around, helping us to imagine that you're holding in the insides. It helps kind of squeeze inwards, is the simplest way I can put that. So another thing that I've seen is postural training. There's education and training on mobility techniques and lifting techniques. So ways that you can, as a new mum or when you're pregnant, how you can be lifting and how you can be moving, including breathing exercises to benefit you or to prevent anything getting worse. There's something called the Tupler's technique, and that's where you can use abdominal splinting and bracing. And then there's the Noble technique, and that's where you actually use your hands either side of your tummy to kind of push those muscles inwards as you're doing a mini curl. I think both of the latter two aren't quite so evidence-based as some of the others, but again, unfortunately, nothing is 100% clear. So here we can see a review. This was a literature review which used 11 publications from 2000 to 2015, and they determined that abdominal exercises can help, and that's through prevention when you're doing them during pregnancy, or reduction if you already have diastasis recti postpartum. However, they did find that there's not currently a gold standard. There's nothing that they can say that this is the best way, this is what they found. The interesting thing about this study, though, which I'll show you on the next page, is they have gone through and picked out each individual study and looked at the exercises that have been useful and what the results were. So we'll take a look at that now. So here you can start to see some of the results from that analysis. The difficulty with literature reviews is you are trusting the person who writes the review to accurately come up with the conclusions from that review, as you're trusting me, because that's what I'm doing as well. So it can be a tricky one. You've got to have that trust in that person. So here they've got things like abdominal crunches, they've got isometric contractions, so that's like bracing, and then they've had a look at people who have been active in their pregnancies compared to people who have only been active postpartum, and they have found that people who have been active in their pregnancies have a lesser degree of diastasis recti than those who haven't. If I'm being honest, though, I haven't been through every single one of these studies, because there's more on the next page as well, to look at exactly the methods that they've used and exactly how they've analysed that data. So I'm trusting these people, which again, we need to take with a pinch of salt. I know it would be easy for me to say, oh, this is a study and this means that it must be fine, it must be good. But I want to be honest and not just tell you what you want to hear. I know that you do want to hear, because I want to hear it for my own like diastasis as well. I want to hear exactly what's going to make it right, but I'm not going to tell you what I don't know 100%. So here's a few more studies that have involved women using a variety of different exercises, so we can begin to see that there are positive benefits. It just is unclear exactly what is causing the benefit. So this is a pilot study which involved 30 women, and the problem with pilot studies is that they are just that, they are a kind of practice to make sure that the procedures, the methods and the analysis, that's all in good shape before the researchers plan to do a larger scale study. So 30 women, it's quite a small sample size, but I still thought it was quite an interesting look at what we could find out in the future. So this was done in 2018, and they did find that the largest changes in the diastasis recti, they were observed from when somebody did a transverse abdominis exercise or with taping. So they were actually saying that by doing those deep core exercises, they found a statistical difference in the kind of severity of the diastasis recti compared to when taping only was used. So it's promising. So here, they've got really good preliminary data, which is nice, but they do need some more information about those with lower back pain and those with pelvic floor dysfunction to see if that is actually going to be improved as well through exercise. Now, 2021, this is the study that nobody wants to find, because it just says that actually the evidence is really bad and maybe nothing really works. And I don't want to hear it. And this is where people cherry pick, because they would specifically not include this because it doesn't give us the information that we'd like to hear. However, they have acknowledged that working on the deep core activation will, or not will, but could help. They've just said that the evidence and the studies that have been done so far are poor, which unfortunately we can't argue with that. I really enjoyed reading this study where they had a 12-week online core strengthening program, and they did find that it reduced the severity of the diastasis, and it improved some of the lower back pain or urinary incontinence. However, I found this one a little bit cheeky because it did significantly affect the length of the diastasis. So that's good, because that is, by stats, that's proven. However, they claim, if you're only reading the abstract, that it's improving all of these other things like the lower back pain and like the urinary incontinence. However, those things weren't actually statistically significant. So a little bit cheeky, but it's nice if it does. So this is just a little bit more from that study, looking at the methods, and you can see that there are only 43 women that were included, and only 19 of those participated for the whole 24 weeks. So it is a very small sample size, but I still think it's worth taking on board and seeing how they have started to see that certain interventions have had a positive impact. And just briefly, here's another systematic review, which again shows similar results to the others that we've had a look at. So it's found that the exercises can potentially improve the distance of the gap between the muscles and also increase the quality of postpartum life. So although it's not definite, I think it's a step in the right direction. So should you bother with any of this if you're planning on having more children? So we're returning to this where they did find that antenatal exercise or exercise in pregnancy can help. So the other thing is that it's better to start from a good foundation. I had severe diastasis with my first child. I did have a hernia, and it needed surgical repair. However, I did a lot of deep core work, and I exercised regularly before I had my second, and I actually didn't get it as bad, and I've not had any problems. I know this is anecdotal evidence, so you can't take this as fact, but I would say don't just go in there without any preparation. So, do I think you should bother trying to do any exercise? I do, because even though diastasis recti may or may not be causing the issues around your pelvic girdle pain or pelvic floor problems and back pain, you'll still find that there's going to be other exercises that will help those problems, even if those exercises aren't really contributing to an improvement of the diastasis recti itself. There's so much else you can do for your pelvic floor problems, for your back pain. You don't have to just blame everything on the diastasis recti, which I think sometimes we get so worried about that we think it's causing everything when maybe it isn't. There could be other factors at play. So I would be wary of the promises that professionals make. If you're reading something which says, I've got a 6-week program that's guaranteed to reduce your diastasis recti or heal it or whatever they're claiming, they would have a lot of money. They'd be very rich if they were actually able to 100% say that, 100% do that, because there isn't the evidence there yet to 100% say it. So just be careful of that, and be wary of anecdotal evidence of people saying, oh, I did 100 sit-ups a day for 20 days and it cured me. That's going to be a bit dangerous as an example. We're going to be wanting to do that, but just be wary. So from the evidence, what would I suggest that you do? I think, and again, this is my review of the evidence and my advice. So I'd say keep on with those deep core stability exercises and your pelvic floor exercises, and you combine that with the correct breathing, your correct posture and safe lifting. And you want to have in mind that this is going to be a longer program and you want it to be progressive. So it's going to be getting harder and harder as things go on, but you want to be starting at a low level. It's not a quick fix. And if you're pregnant, I'd say start now. But if you're not, if you had children a few years ago and you feel like you've still got this problem, then it isn't too late. There are things that you can do. So when you are exercising, I want you to avoid the exercises which might cause a bulging of the abdominal wall. So you just take a little look down and see if you can see any doming or bulging, then scale it back a little bit. When you're doing any lifting or on your exertion, you need to be breathing out, because you don't want to be holding your breath or inhaling on exertion, because that's going to be increasing the intra-abdominal pressure. So another piece of guidance is raising the lower limbs above the ground when lying on the back. Doing sit-ups, crunches or heavy lifting are things that you need to be careful of, but they aren't things that you'll never be able to do again. You will be able to do these things again. It's just things to work towards in a progressive manner. So well done if you've got this far. What's next for you? So do you know how to check to see if you have diastasis recti? Because there's a simple way of how you can do this at home. If you join my group, I'll put something on the Facebook group which will show you how to do that. So do you feel confident completing the exercises, and do you know what to look out for? We've discussed that a little bit, how to exercise safely. Do you know any ways of how you can reduce your back pain if that's something that you're suffering with? And are you sure you know how to use your breathing to make sure you're getting the benefits from your exercise and not putting yourself at risk? And then there's some small changes that you can make with lifting, standing on your day-to-day. So here's a little bit about who I am, this random person on the internet who I've told you not to listen to. That's not me. So I am Carly, and I'm a mum of two. I've had diastasis recti, I've had pelvic girdle pain, and to be honest, I've not had easy pregnancies. But I'm really nicely on track now, and I'm feeling good, and you can feel good. So since getting pregnant the first time, I changed and I became a pre and postnatal exercise specialist. I originally had a background in teaching and education, and my love of all of the evidence-based practice comes from that and comes from my master's in education. So I've trained as a yoga teacher and a fitness instructor since then, but I like to bring all of the education and the knowledge into my programs because I feel like, well, that's just me, and I think it's so important. So that's it. If you're not sure about some of the things that we've spoken about, then join my pregnancy and postnatal fitness and wellbeing community. I've put the link down there. I've also put my link tree down there so that you can find me on LinkedIn or Instagram, and you can have a look at my website, see what kind of things are going on. I'm regularly going to be updating the group with free content, and I'll be answering questions, and this group will always be free. I want there to be a source of information for women where you can ask me a question either anonymously or not, and I can answer it for you, because if you've got a question, it's likely that other people who are in the same boat as you have those questions. You can also email me, and I'll be happy to help. But thank you, and I really hope you found it useful, and if you need anything, I'm here.